of the United States Constitution. According to the court, those fees require a public employee to fund a private organization with whom they may not want to associate or with whom they may disagree. Such agency fees are now unconstitutional. The court's opinion also includes language stating that union members must affirmatively consent to union membership and thus to the deduction of dues. So Janice has nothing to do with how the district will be funding our new teacher salary. And then another comment or question was that the levy overlap that is only taking place this year will help to fund the new teacher salary. And that is not correct. The levy...
Jen, can you
yes?
explain
I'm sorry?
The levy overlap, what exactly that means?
That's a good point. So before the state legislation chose to fund the basic education assistance, BEA, sometimes some districts there was no limitations on or not as many limitations on the levy, and our district used levy for, what's the right word here? Extras is not the right word. Non-state funded things, sometimes like janitors or after school programs or other things like that. The last levy did not fund basic education. That number was, I think it was 2.75 per thousand. Does that sound correct, anybody?
I think it was at $2.40 around that.
Okay, $2.40 per thousand of property taxes. When the state started funding education better, which became this year, they made a new ruling that local districts could not fund more or charge on their local levy more than $1.50 per thousand of property taxes. So the state funding BEA helping teacher pay salary started the beginning of this school year, when the levy change to decrease to the 1.5 per thousand does not take place until January.
19.
So there is a little bit of an overlap, is what the levy overlap definition is. So the levy, someone had stated that the levy overlap is what is helping to fund this increase in teacher salary. The increase in teacher salary is not coming from the levy overlap. It is coming from state BEA money, basic education assistance money. Clear as mud? I just wanted to define for the legislative report where that is not the same case.
So you're saying that local dollars are not funding teacher salaries, our local dollars from levy money?
Correct, are not funding this increase that the teachers just had.
Local levy dollars.
Local levy dollars are not
Is that a
paying that.
safe and true statement? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Local dollars, I think, would not be correct, but local levy dollars is.
Right, local levy dollars, that is a better term, and I wasn't using the right one. Okay. Then, other legislative information came in an email today from WASDA, the Washington State, let's see if I can remember what this stands for, Washington State School District Association.
School director.
School director, oh my gosh, there's so many initials that just sometimes they don't all fit in my brain. So they forwarded an email from the OSPI, the state superintendent, Chris, let me see if I can say this correctly. Reichdahl, that tomorrow he will be announcing publicly to the governor and the legislature operating and capital budget requests on these activities. It is important for the legislature to put adequate fences around this new funding to ensure students are receiving the supports they need. 3, a restoration of local levy authority and elimination of the inequitable $1.50 per thousand, or $2,500 per student model. I will propose, this is directly from him. Districts may offer local levies to their voters that equate to 22% of their state and federal funds, a cap of $3,500 per student for a handful of districts whose 22% would exceed $3,500 per student, and a new levy equalization model that fully funds any district whose 22% levy opportunity would force their local levy rate above $3.75 per thousand of assessed valuation. In other words, no district would have to exceed $3.75 per thousand. The state will pick up the rest so the district gets the same amount of total resources as they would if they went to their 22% maximum, no more 50% or 60% discounting of levy equalization. 4, I am proposing an 8% capital gains tax on long-term capital gains. This will generate $1 billion per fiscal year. $500 million per year will buy down 35 cents of the new state property tax on a permanent basis. This creates capacity for most districts to pass a higher local levy without a net increase to property taxes from today's level. And $500 million per year will purchase our basic education enhancements, special education, counselors, nurses, etc., that we talked about earlier. This budget request is not piecemeal. It works together. The only way to ensure future levies are not funding basic education is to add state funds for things like special education, counselors, etc. As long as levies are truly enrichment with proper fences around them, local voters should have the flexibility to support their students beyond the program of basic education. Then, 3 major themes of the capital budget include: 1, this is much shorter, a proposal for simple majority to pass capital bonds. That would be a big change for us. 2, a roughly 57% increase in the K-12 capital budget that will fund a new approach to matching dollars, which will spread more funding to more districts, primarily for K-3 class size reductions, and a new approach for rural and property poor districts that will provide a dedicated pool of funds to build capital facilities. So, that will, all of those changes that he is proposing and will be asking for, most of those will not go into effect until the 2019-2020 school year, but some items could be expedited if the legislature chooses to do so. So those are some major things that will be asked tomorrow for the legislation and legislators and governor that all apply to us.
So that is, just to be clear, that is the WASDA legislative priorities, correct?
Actually, that is what
Or
OSPI
sorry.
will be asking, and WASDA forwarded that to us. And that I think WASDA helped to create some of that list for their what they felt like were priorities.
I think the 50% for capital bonds are that's something that's they've been talking about that one for years.
Right, and that doesn't mean that any of those things will take place. That's just what is being requested, and
All right.
and
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
The other thing that was added to this, registration opens for the NSBA conference. I don't think it's necessary that the board makes a decision today on who's interested in going, but just start thinking about it. And the earlier that we know, the earlier we can get hotels. That's usually the biggest trick. And we also have the opportunity, if we would like Talia to go ahead and book the hotels, they can be canceled later. If for board members who maybe decide they don't want to go, or registration for NSBA, we can probably hold that off for a little bit till we know who's going.
So just to make sure, NSBA, National School Board Association, will be in Philadelphia
this year.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay.
So I guess maybe some direction that would benefit Dr. Hertz and Talia is to know if the board feels it'd be a good idea to go ahead and reserve some rooms right now, just to make sure we're not struggling to find a place for those who do decide to go.
As long as we can cancel them with full refund and no cost to the district, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, I agree. Does everyone else feel that way? Getting mostly nods?
I think going as far as Philadelphia, when last year it was in Texas, and the following year it's back on the west part of the states. I don't know if I would call Texas the west, but is more reasonable every other year for NSBA as opposed to every year. So I think no.
So you're definitely out, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to go to Philadelphia, but I don't think that's fair on the district's time.
So I think it sounds like just 4, I'm seeing not as a possibility, so I don't know that I'm going to go either, but I think it's a little too early to make that decision personally. So it sounds like 4 board members we can reserve hotel rooms for, and then I don't know if Dr. Hurst, if you're planning on going or not. Okay. All right. So I think it'd be a good idea to revisit that end of next month. Would the board feel? Second meeting of next month?
I could be fine, just leave it in director discussions for a while.
Every time?
We don't have to discuss it every time, but it's just there to remind.
Okay.
And just my feeling on these kind of conferences is I don't think the whole board has to attend. I think if one board member wanted to go, I think that's fine too. I don't think it's like we all have to go or nobody should go kind of a thing. And in the past, that's how it's been. The local ones, Spokane, Seattle, we've all made a commitment to try to make, but national, from my point of view, is just if you can and you want to and it interests you. Like for me, for example, I wouldn't even want to consider even deciding if I was going or not until the agenda comes out and I see what's on it, what kind of offerings there are there, and if I feel like it's of value to the district. The cost to fly to Philadelphia, I don't think it's any more expensive. It's just an extra 2 hours of my life each way.
Okay. Is the board in agreement with Tony's comments? All right. We'll move on to, if there's no other board reports or discussions that maybe were missed, we'll move on to item B3, student representative report, singular. Isabel?
It's just me. First round of STAR 360 assessments are done in English and math. We have a lot more kids on grade level than ever before, according to our data. Tovar and our teachers will be working with Ms. Colley on October 12th, LDI Day, to design a school-wide intervention process that will be focused on helping students fill in their gaps relevant to math and English. We will be doing school-wide intervention on Mondays. October 6th, DOHS had a community garage sale with the help of Mrs. Nuno's DOHS leadership class. Our MMS leadership kids and our MMS, sorry, I'm reading this. It went very well and the school raised over $300. Then we donated the leftovers to the Catholic Church. Our kids invested a lot of hours into this project. I'm not in leadership, but I know the kids had a fun time setting it up and getting items for the yard sales, so.
Isabel, do you know what those funds will be used for?
I don't.
Okay.
I think it just goes into our school fund and kind of if
Like
we
an
need
ASB kind of a thing?
Mhm.
Okay.
October 8th through 10th, we will be working on our first school-wide project-based learning project called Little Libraries. It's so much fun, honestly. Like, I'm so happy we're doing this. We can design projects that will increase our student community and literacy test rates. We will be posting pictures from this event on our district homepage. You are all invited to come by and see them anytime tomorrow. We have shut down classes to make this project a reality. All stakeholders, parents, district staff, and board members will be invited to our presentation assembly, which I'm not quite sure when it is yet. Students are taking a lot of pride, and we thank the local businesses who donated to this project. ACE, Johnson's Glass, Builders First Source. We also thank Ms. Shank for providing us with PBL budget for our school. Our second project will be determined by our students, and they will be fully responsible for the next project. So we're going to decide what it is, like kind of meet as a school and decide what we're going to want to do, and then we have to plan it all, get sponsors. Yeah, so this time all the teachers did that for us, so it's pretty smooth sailing, but next time it might be a little bit more bumpy.
Can you tell us about this project?
Yeah, okay. It's kind of like, it looks like a mailbox, and we place them in different parts of the community, and we put books in there. People can donate them and just put them in there. So anybody can go and take a book and read it and bring it back, or keep it. So it kind of helps those who might not have the opportunity to afford books, so they can go get them for free. They don't have to pay anything. They just go take one and hopefully bring it back, or they can keep it. It's just a way that we thought would be awesome to help contribute to our community, and it's a really awesome project for us because we're actually getting to put in the work and just really take responsibility for it. So hopefully it'll help kids excel in reading, because I know it's kind of a big thing at the moment that kids are having a hard time with reading and math at a younger age, and so that just kind of builds up into the older years. So that's...
Is there any plans on like the long-term checking the mailboxes and making the little libraries and making sure and replenishing books or anything like that, or just that it's working?
Yeah, so our leadership class, I think, is going to go around and just make sure everything's, still there and make sure it's not damaged or anything. And I think putting it at businesses will help keep it from getting damaged. So our specific little library is going to Sacman Law Office. So I don't think anybody would want to vandalize there, but you never know. But
And do you know how many are going out?
each PFS class, so 2, come on, Joe, like,
There was at least 7 or 8.
yeah, I think there's like 8.
What does PFS stand for? I'm sorry.
It's like the pause of DOHS.
Oh, okay.
So it's just PFS.
Okay.
It's a leadership class.
Okay.
Yeah,
So what have you personally learned from this project?
it's really fun to paint things. It's really important that we have the opportunity to kind of get our name out there, that we're not the bad kids, and this is a great way to show that. And it's, a lot of kids are like, oh, we're not bad kids, but this is a way to really actually, put your money where your mouth is and show that. And you get to learn how to build things too and use tools. So it's fun. And it's great to get to work with people that aren't your friends, and not saying that you're not friendly with them, but you don't have to do a project with just everybody when you do a class project. And this one you have to do it with people you're not really familiar with, I guess. So teamwork is a really big part of this, and it's awesome. And I'm really thankful that we are getting to do this. So I have a couple more things. October 18th, we'll be joining OHS for our 2nd annual Career Showcase. We look forward to this event. So last year we got to go and kind of just look at all the different businesses. I think did you have a booth there? I feel
Me?
like you did. Yeah.
I did not.
Oh.
Do
Well-
you this year?
For shame. I do not.
It's basically where I'm sure Taylor would have reported on this too, but it's just where students, juniors and seniors, get to go and kind of just look at all the different businesses, get
8th
ideas.
through 12th this year.
Yeah, I think it's everybody, but it's mainly focused for seniors and juniors, but everybody does get to go. But yeah, it was really exciting last year, and I think it was kind of a really big step for our school district and our community, because it's local businesses and in the community. So, and my gosh, after our first month of classes, DOHS students are currently passing 71% of classes that are being taken. Tovar is tracking this data and makes all students aware of it on a monthly basis using our TV monitor. We are also tracking our Student of the Month, and Perfect Attendance Awards. We would like to thank McDonald's Restaurant for their donation of free value meal to each of these students who earn these awards, and will continue to emphasize the importance of daily attendance. I'm done. Any questions?
Great
Are
job.
you getting a free value meal?
I am not,
Uh-oh.
sadly.
Okay. Thank you, Isabel. We will move on now to administrative items. Item C1, required approvals. I'll accept a motion.
I motion we approve required approvals.
There's been a motion by Director Garza to approve,
Second.
second by Director Stevenson. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item C2, Superintendent Comments. There are no informational items in Superintendent Comments. We do have a presentation, so we'll move on to item C3. There are two presentations here, pre-approved presentations to the board. The first one, I believe, is Scootney Springs Elementary annual report. So come on up.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much for inviting us this evening to come present to you. I'm Deborah Boudouin. I'm the principal at Scootney Springs Elementary.
I'm Michael Ann Perez. I'm the instructional coach at Scootney.
And I'm Denise Marriage, the assistant principal at Scootney Springs Elementary.
So we wanted to just start by talking about current reality, because everything that we do in order to move forward, we have to know where we are. And on this slide, we've got a couple of questions. These questions are questions that we use anytime we look at data, but it's also something that we look at the end of a school year and at the beginning of the school year to help us guide our path moving forward. So what does the data show? We need to know where our kids are in order to know how far we can go and what needs to happen in order to move our kids along. The second piece is what are our celebrations. We have to make sure that we're taking time to celebrate our successes, and we've got some really great things to celebrate at Scootney. So we need to make sure that we're honoring the really great things that are happening, as well as pushing to move forward. What are our problems of practice? That one gets a little bit trickier, but we have to see where are those holes? Where are those areas where we're not doing so great? What's something that we're noticing that we need to be doing better on, and identifying what about our practice needs to be adjusted and changed so that we can help our kids move forward. And then the last question we look at is, what does the data not show? Because a lot of times our tests are one moment in time. It's one piece. It's academic. Maybe maybe the data shows that this child is not at standard, but that data doesn't necessarily show that child made 2.5 years worth of growth last year. So making sure that we're really just being clear that this is a piece of data. There's a lot of other things that go into it, and there's a lot of story behind that. But we look at these 4 questions. Anytime there's a new testing cycle, that we sit down and we go through these questions with them, with our teachers around the student data, but we also use these questions when we're looking at how do we set our goals for the year. So this is how we start building our vision.
So looking at our data, does anyone mind if I stand and go to the board? I'm better if I can move. The first piece of data that we would like to highlight comes from our really great reading program, and there are 2 different types of assessments that we give our students. The purple is our beginning decoding skills, and the yellow is the advanced decoding survey. So when we're looking at this, we have some celebrations, some really great things. So if you look right here, our 6th graders, we have 80 to 90% of our kids who are strong decoders. That means they can read, and that's really exciting for us. But also, if you look right here in 3rd grade, these are really great numbers. 45% of our kids at this point can read. We're still early in the school year, so we've got a lot of opportunity. And one thing that I want to highlight is that we are really seeing these increased readers, and we really feel like it's because of our early literacy initiative, having the kids come up from preschool who are ready to begin school in kindergarten. We're really seeing that effect here, because we have already, at the very beginning of the year, that we came in day 1 and started testing to kind of find out where we were. So this is really great information for us, because we've got some strong decoders. So the next piece
Can I ask some questions, I'm sorry, on that page before you go off?
Sure.
So what's the difference between a beginning and an advanced kind of question?
So beginning are the basic, like decoding. And then when you get into the advanced, it's that multisyllabic decoding of words. Did you want to speak more?
So beginning decoding skills are initial sound, final sound, short vowel sounds in the center, simple blends, digraphs, things like that. When you get into the advanced decoding, you're looking at vowel teams, the OUs, the multisyllable words, some of those non-standards. So beginning decoding skills versus advanced decoding skills.
So what you're basically saying is being able to read, not necessarily comprehension
This
of what
is
they're reading.
all-
It's just
Yep.
ability to read.
Yes, this
in
test
different
is just
phases.
ability to read.
Okay.
But that walks us right into the next piece, which gets us into comprehension. So STAR 360 reading assessment really focuses in on the comprehension. So after we get them to where they can read, now do they understand what they can read? Again, I want to point to our first grade. These were our kinders last year. They're coming in really strong. And I have to make a disclaimer because with kinder and first, it's an early literacy test. So these are pre-academic skills. But you can see that they're really strong coming in at the very first of the year. Now we have a lot of opportunity to grow them and to bring them into readers. We're still learning a lot about the STAR 360 assessment. We are learning what it tells us and what it doesn't tell us. And what I want to point out right now is our sixth graders, who were last year's fifth graders. So coming in, it's showing us at 17% of our students that are on benchmark. And if we could go to the next slide. And STAR 360 is supposed to give us information that's going to help us with our state assessment, which is the ESPA. And these same sixth graders, who were last year's fifth graders, were showing at 47% at benchmark. And so there's a disconnect. There's a discrepancy between the data, and we're not really sure what it's telling us, what it's not telling us. So that's one thing that we are dedicated this year, is to figuring out what that STAR assessment is telling us and what it's not telling us, because we're using it to gauge how we're doing so that we know, like, as far as the ESPA, how we'll be doing. So that's something that we're really digging in deeper this year. So then we get to the STAR 360 math, and again, if you would focus here on first grade, we are really excited. These kids, a lot of these kids had the preschool. They came in and kinder, our kinders, what we were doing there was working, because through the summer and then they come back and we have over 3/4 of our kids meeting benchmark. So our job is going to be to make sure that we keep this trend and that we keep pushing them forward and growing them. Again, we are, if you could focus here on the sixth grade, this is showing us that 46% of our kids are on benchmark for our sixth graders, which is really exciting. But then again, I talked about that discrepancy between ESPA and STAR. So if you'd go to the next slide. So 47% of our kids were on target, but only 28 of those kids last year, or 28% of those kids last year met benchmark. So we put in a math intervention, and we're really focusing on the ESPA stems, like the formatting and the questioning, so that they're transferring that knowledge into our state testing to show what those kids really can do. So we're not really sure, but we're working very hard to make sure that the STAR 360 is giving us the correct information to help us with that state testing.
Okay, so that's kind of our how we started off the year. That was all our beginning of the year data. Looking at all of that, now we have to start our work. So our work is all based 100% on the ends. So I'm sure these look familiar to you guys. These are the ends 1, 2, and 3. And these ends are what's used to develop the OSD scorecard. And the OSD scorecard is our guide to help us with our work. So our site plan is created as a whole school, in a whole school orientation, at the beginning of the year orientation. We looked at our data. We looked at the ends, we looked at the OSD scorecard, we looked at what are our 2022 goals, and we set goals based on those. Now with those goals, the next piece of that is our instructional focus. So we can't do the same thing and expect to get different results. So we have to be looking at our instruction and where are we really going to be putting our time and our energy and making those changes and making those differences so that our kids can grow even more. These are the goals that the teams, the school has set. And in some cases, they're pretty lofty. We've got, in third grade, we've got a 19% jump in their goal. Last year, they had 31% of their kids meeting standard in ELA. This year, their goal is 50. These are built, these are staggered to build so that by 2022, we can meet those goals that are on the OSD scorecard. So some of the goals have to be lofty, but we want to make sure that they're also achievable. And so what are we going to be doing different in third grade ELA instruction so that we can get from that 31 to that 50? How are we going to change what we do in the class to help move us along? So these goals are based on that 2022 scorecard and moving us forward.
So what we want to do this year is focus on what matters most, what we know is going to give us the biggest bang, and really what we know is going to be effective. So if you would go to the next one. So our instructional focus this year is going to involve intentional planning, high impact strategies, and active student engagement. And we know that each one of these works together to really get us to the place that we want to be. And so when teachers intentionally plan and they use those high impact strategies, that's going to engage students. And when you engage students, that's when the learning happens and more learning happens. So some of the ways we're going to do that this year is with project-based learning. That's what Isabel was talking about, where you do a community or a real-life project, and you bring in experts to tell you about what it means to build or how to use those tools. And so we had a team of teachers go this summer, and so the expectation is that they'll do at least one project this year. We had some 5th grade teachers go, and one of their ideas was to have some type of a community garden. 2nd grade went, and some of their ideas were around planning a meal and what does that dietary look like in 2nd grade, having a meal for their families. Now, these are just ideas, so don't hold us to those, but those are ideas that came out of that. And then they got talking, and 5th grade said, well, we could grow the food, and 2nd grade, you could make the meal and talk about cooking and what does healthy eating look like. And so those are some of our ideas for our project-based learning. Jen?
If the dinner thing works out, I think you should invite us because that would be really interesting to see a 2nd grade planned meal.
We will.
Gotcha.
Yes. And we know that project-based learning engages students. Clearly, as Isabella has pointed out, it's engaging. Student discourse, which means talking between teacher and student to student. So we've had a huge push in the trainings that we've been going to. QTEL stands for Quality Teaching for English Language Learners. Some of those strategies, we had some people go this summer to that training, and they presented to our staff the other day about structuring a discourse and how do you set that up in your classroom and what does that look like for students to talk to students about academic things, as well as our TDG. Math, some of our teachers, coaches, and administrators got to go to that, and it was all around student discourse. How do you set up that discussion between peers to really have them talk about math and what math means and looks like? And then our STEM and NGSS also talk about having that conversation between students and about what they're making and what they're doing. Relationships, we know, is a huge one. We had a team go to responsive classrooms this summer and have come back and begun to tell our staff about it. Every classroom has agreed to do classroom meetings in the morning meetings. And so they come in and they meet together as a community to build social emotional awareness, as well as they also have a morning letter that the teacher writes to the students, welcoming them, maybe asking them a question about something that they learned the day before, or maybe asking them about something they're going to learn that day. And so really building that community within the classrooms. Engagement goes with all of these things. How do we engage our students to help them learn? Teacher clarity around standards, learning intentions, and success criteria. We know that that's huge. When the teacher knows what they're going to teach and why, that's huge. As well as, like Deborah said, looking at the data. What does it tell us? What does it not tell us? And what are we going to do from there?
So positive student behavior. We're really focusing this year on changing the way we're doing things. And part of what Mikey just said, we have responsive classroom training where it's really about building culture and about building relationships, because we know that students behave better if they feel like they are included in the classroom and they feel like that they are supported. We had some teachers go to Restorative Practices, which really focuses, instead of on the punitive, it focuses on the harm done and how we can repair that. So if students understand what they did, the impact it was on other people, and how they can repair that, then that gives them more tools and sets that positive tone for behavior. We're really focusing on the multi-tiered support, and what do we do for all students? What do we do for those 15 or 20% who are really struggling, and then what do we do for those kids who are chronic behavior issues? We really wanted to, we're focusing on collaborating with parents and community members to really help support those kids in their behavior. And we are excited to be able to roll this out to teachers and to parents. And then attendance matters. Over the summer, the assistant principals got together and we really focused on how can we improve our attendance? What can we do to put in place so that we get the message out to kids and to parents that it's really important that they are in school, because if they're not in school, in seat, on time, then they're not getting the maximized learning. So we came up with letters through that we send out like at the very beginning, explaining chronic absenteeism and how important it is for students to be in school and what happens when they're not. We are carefully monitoring. We're putting in a new system. It's called RAWEE, R-A-A-W-E-E, and it's a system where it tracks when students are gone, and it helps like generate letters so that we can be on top of the attendance issue. We also have been setting up meetings as needed with parents to, fully explain why it's so important for kids to be in school. We want to make sure that our interventions and supports are in place early so that we can get kids in their seats on time every day.
And all of that is in support of the district's mission, which is to cultivate the safe environment and respect and rapport where instruction is intentional, engaging, challenging, and accessible for all students. And we really are working on, dreaming big and daring to be big. Just real quick, I wanted to go back to a couple of those those key pieces that Mikey was talking about. Engagement has an effect size of 1.09. So if you can get students engaged, their learning increases exponentially. Relationships have an effect size of 0.72. Classroom discussion and discourse has an effect size of 0.82. And then teacher clarity has an effect size of 0.75. So all of those will give us 2-ish or more years worth of growth in 1 year's time if we leverage them correctly. And that's really what we're working on doing, is leveraging them correctly to help our students close those achievement gaps, be successful, and be big.
So 0.7 is 1 year's worth of growth.
0.4?
0.4.
0.4
Okay.
is 1 year's growth, 1 year's time. Anything above 0.4, that's where you want to be, because then you're working on closing that gap and working on bigger gains.
Any other board questions? So I have a question. I mean, when I look at the plan, that looks great to me, but as not being an educator, you probably could put anything up there and it would look great to me, honestly. What I'm curious about, if you're just looking at our ends policy, ends 1 and ends 2 apply, or ends 3 apply more to elementary. Ends 2 is more of a graduation, probably applies more to the upper levels. But one of the things we talk about is we want to see that continuous growth. But I wasn't able to see from that presentation how students' growth works. We got to see last year's results, but not how did they grow from the previous year. And as one board member, that's something that I always like to see. So maybe just an idea for future, I like to see how did they grow? Are we achieving that? When it comes down to your plans to improve attendance, those look great too. What I'm curious about is how has attendance improved since you've been implementing that as compared to last year. So
Okay.
those
So
are
I
what
think-
this is one board member. I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
Yeah, and so trying to keep time in mind, we didn't add a whole bunch of that. However, the attendance specifically, I think I have those numbers in my head. Last year, September, we had about an average of 4.72 absences. This year, we're at like 4.32. I believe our numbers are around there. So we've dropped, not significantly, but we have dropped.
You
per
measuring those
average.
how? I'm sorry, 4.32.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
Periods. so there are 4 attendance periods in a day, and so there, like if you take the average of how many attendance periods students were absent, so on average a student was absent 4.72 of those periods last year.
Per
and then
month?
Yes, in September.
Okay.
And then
I'm
in
with you.
September this year it was 4.3-ish. So it's dropped not quite half a point, not quite half a period. But it has
Gotcha.
dropped.
Okay.
So
That
it's a
makes
little bit more than a day. So it was like a day and a quarter. And now it's not quite that.
Okay.
So we are looking at all of those things, and when we do have that, I'm sorry, I just wasn't in this presentation.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I mean, I think from the past, as board members, we're suckers for growth. We love to see growth, and that's a big
Yeah.
part of our ends policy and what we push for. So, just going forward,
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff is just good information. And unfortunately, I couldn't make the visit the other day, so I'm looking forward to hearing what the board has to say about the visit. But but this is just me. I don't know if the rest of the board necessarily agrees with me on.
But it was
From a
great
growth
to see
perspective.
that you realized that there were some discrepancies and you were upfront and showing that and not like, oh yeah, let's just show you the good numbers that you saw that last year's 4th graders or this year's 5th graders, instead of going, oh, but look at these numbers are so great, that those are the same kids just moving through. So I did appreciate seeing that.
I appreciate your lofty goals and your willingness to attack them and be on schedule by 2022.
So I was going to say, if the board wants to talk about the visit as well.
No,
that
I
would be a good
thoroughly
time.
enjoyed my visit, enjoyed the time with the kindergarten class. Mrs. Foley, as soon as we walked into the class, we were greeted and our hands were shook by the kids, which was very nice. It was very inviting. And the 4th grade class, we joined right along with their project that they were doing. And it was a lot of fun. Very interesting on what they're doing.
Oh, I guess I'll go. I thought everybody was going.
Go, Isabel, go.
I really enjoy talking to the kids and getting to talk to the teachers as well, because in the past they've been kind of focused on, it was all about bond stuff, and that's like all they could really focus on. They didn't actually say how the kids were doing or like things like that. And it wasn't just Scootney. I mean, it was all the schools. But they were not afraid to kind of say what was actually going on and like their concerns, and that was really nice to see. And, Dr. Hurst told one of the teachers not to be afraid to kind of come up and be adamant with some of the things like that was going on. And so that was great to see. And the kids were really talkative. That one boy, I'm not quite sure what his name was, but he was
One of the 2 6th graders?
Yes, he
Indeed,
was
that's his
very
last name.
like he was talking, asking questions like what's it like being an adult and stuff like that. So it was kind of cool to see that, and it was great to hear that they feel like they're kind of like guinea pigs, and so hopefully me and Taylor working on going in and talking to the not just sixth graders, but to all the students and kind of being like a advocate for them, because we're for the whole school district, not just the high school, and so it was great to see that. So thank you guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. All right, the next item under item C3 is the EL16 board presentation. Dr. Hirsch, were you going to be doing that presentation?
So we have 4 members that are present of the safety committee, and I'm not sure if Rigo is actually a member, but he has a role this evening. So we're going to ask if Heidi Wagner can come down, and also Amy. We can just all come down, and Rigo and Greg, just pull up a chair. And what we're doing, board, is just providing you an update on our progress with EL16. Just want to share with you briefly about the format. So as you can see, each element is broken down by staff, students, and community. As you look at the language in EL16, you can see those stakeholders are present. And also that was great feedback that we received also from Chief Shank. Thank you for that. And also what you'll see is at the very bottom is experts. And that really lends itself to how we're educating ourselves to educate those members as well, the staff, students, and committee. So each one of these individuals will start off with element 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they'll speak to our progress. And I will just say I commend this committee for all the work that they've done. They put a lot of time and effort, and you'll see that there's a lot of things in place, but there's a lot of work to be done as well, and you'll hear that. So we'll have Amy go ahead and start with element 1.
So really the launch, I would say, of a lot of this, aside from Greg's work with facilities, a lot of the things that Heidi and I have been involved with began at our community forum last spring. And what was kind of going on in society at the time, we all recognized that we have some work to do to put some things in place. We had a lot of pieces, but nothing real cohesive, one system. So I think Rob was the first one to draft EL 17 or 16, and we kind of took that as a roadmap and ran with it. And it's funny how we've all sort of just landed on the pieces that either were in our strength or our interest, base or whatever, and have led committees and really, for me personally, a lot of good work with our community. It's given me a place to, anytime I invite in experts or mental health professionals or law enforcement, they're here at amazing support. So for the first piece of EL 16, it really has to do with identifying behaviors. We really had to think about what are we doing. This one's about staff, to train our staff. What do we have in place so that they're aware of what to look for. When do they refer? How do they refer? Meaning even to their own school counselors. But when is that decision made? When we're very concerned about students and the referral goes outside the building. So with that in mind, I know that you've had a chance to review this, had a couple of great conversations already, good questions and answers. But because this one really focuses on staff, the left-hand column there, in a nutshell, Greg was already putting together a safety handbook. So we bombed in on his work and said, let's just put everything in one place and add all of our prevention materials and all of the resources we're creating so that everybody knows, even though it's a hefty document, that that's the one place that you go and you can find anything you need. So the handbook is just full of information, but to highlight for this particular element, we beefed up our Safe Schools training for our staff. We added components around more bullying recognition, behaviors around not only bullies, but kids being bullied. And then the mental health piece for teachers, how to refer and how to set up a positive environment. A lot of the social emotional learning you heard about at Scootney, they have a great tiered system there. We're working on that in every building. We have included in this handbook warning signs. So every staff has already had it, or every principal and counselor set have had trainings with their staff on what to look for and how to refer. Same with suicide. We put together a resource of Othello-specific phone numbers, things that juvenile offers, things that the clinic offers, the hospital, our mental health facility. Just in an easy way to spell out in one place, again, where teachers can go to find things. And you can continue to read through that. The last thing I'd like to mention for this one is our threat assessment team. We did a lot of research and learned and got feedback from our community mental health professionals that if we set up a strong team within the district to filter and review threats and situations that do come up, that it makes our interventions better. It makes us hyper aware of what's going on. And then the referrals and when threats and things do happen and kids need help, we have a better system in place to review those. And so we have a team in place. So we're pretty proud of that.
Questions there? Oh, okay. So Amy has spearheaded this threat assessment team and really has a desire to bring everyone together, and I appreciate her desire to do that because it has brought all of us to the table here. So element 2 is what I focused on, is prevention against potential physical threats to students and staff. So a lot of these are repeats, and so I'm just going to kind of briefly go over them. But with our staff, like she said, our Safe Schools has really been beefed up, and we're trying to hit some areas that aren't always recognized, like the bullying and student mental health. Mental health with our students is really important, and we recognize that we have a lot of students that need help, and how can we find that help for them? So we're really working together with our community to find that help for students and recognize that, and have provided elements for our staff to recognize those as well, flow charts and referral forms and things like that. So everything is, like we said, in the safety handbook, which is quite large, as you can see, but you have it electronically as well. The next thing is we're performing lockdowns, emergency drills, earthquake drills, shelter in place, evacuations, all those types of typical things, but things that could help prevent harm or threat to our students. As all of you have probably noticed, when you enter any school, you are checked and asked if you're there as a visitor, what you're there for, and usually given a tag or a name tag or a device to carry with you. And this is to prevent any outsiders that are unwanted there, and just to check in and make sure that the right people are in our schools. Signage is posted around the buildings for bullying and prevention, and we have video surveillance at each school. Counseling services that provide for our staff and for the students. Staff that have questions about, I have this student, I'm not sure what to do. What do you think how should I help this child? So those counselors are not only helping students, but the staff as well. We have anonymous reporting systems posted around the district and in each building. In the secondary schools, we have security specialists in each building, and they're aware of our students that need a little extra help. And then the mandated Safe Schools training, which I already talked about, and the district incident command training, which we will be, Greg will be leading the charge. Greg will be leading the charge on that. School resource officer is available to our district as well. Gaggle notification system, which I know you guys have all heard about already, but that notifies the admin of any child that is a threat to themselves or others and alerts them when needed. Our SEL, social emotional learning systems that are in each building, and our district is really, I don't even know how to say it, but we are really excited about what is moving forward with our social emotional learning and developing how are we going to set our goals and our desires for everyone in our district, for all of the children, and then how each building will carry that out is up to them. The district-trained threat assessment team is in place, and then emotional distress flow chart. So in the handbook, there's flow charts and things like that if the teachers need it. For students, is pretty much the same things, but one thing that's different for them is the building principals were all trained in the Safe Schools Training Handbook when they train their staff, and then they have implemented certain parts of the SAFE training out to students and to the parents, either at open house or wherever they felt like it was needed, but that has been up to the individual schools. Community is the last section that I just want to touch on, and one of those things is the board presentation tonight to make sure that our community is aware of what we are doing. And I just asked Amy, I said, when did this all start? And she said, last spring. And so really a lot has been done in a short amount of time. The parents' guide for the Safe Schools Handbook, and then the district incident command training, and then our partnerships with around the community, which have really been developed the last 6 months with CBHA, the threat assessment team, community members, community health, and then utilizing our community partners in the classrooms so that students are aware that what they have in the community and how they can help them. And then our partnership with Adams County Health and Social Services.
Can I make a comment? So in some of the, I asked some clarification questions and had some other conversations between reading this and coming to this meeting. And one of my questions was, it says multiple times that students know how to anonymously report if there's a bullying event that they are aware of or have seen or something. I asked 3 of my 4 children, is there a way that you can anonymously report? And they said, well, no, the teachers would know who I am. And I said, no, on your Chromebook, is there a way that you could say that bullying is happening? And then there was a really interesting conversation that took place about whether it would truly be anonymous or not. And I was like, I don't care if it's really anonymous. I just want to know, do you know how to report bullying? 3 of them said no. I did not ask my high schooler, so I have 2 in elementary and 1 in middle school. My high schooler was sleeping, and that's not an answer I would have gotten a realistic answer to. So just a little bit of feedback. I'm sure that there's tons of things around the school. Some of mine are not socially aware of anything except for themselves. So that might be part of it, but just some information to have that 3 of my 4 said no. So
thank you for that. We'll definitely follow up on that. This isn't saying that we have specifically trained them. We're saying it's available to them.
Okay, that's good to know.
Okay. And I just want to say thank you to Heidi and Amy for all the work they've done on the threat assessment team and on all the work that's gone into that over this summer. It is amazing and truly their forte, not mine. And having Amy head this up really made it, it's an exceptional piece of work that they've done and added to this crisis handbook. Yeah, because it's bigger. I didn't print it out. Yeah. Okay, so element 3. I'm going to talk about element 3. So you can see some of these are the same across the board, but we've trained our staff in Run, Hide, Fight. Last year. We're working on fitting it into their training this year for new staff and a refresher for the current staff. We do have a school resource officer in place. We're having discussions with the OPD about a second one. Campus security. We have 2 at the high school, 1 at the middle school. We're talking about adding additional campus security. Let's jump over. You want me to, I can jump back and forth, or I can just go down the list. Whatever's easier for you guys. Training for administrators and staff. We've had de-escalation training. That training is on how to de-escalate a situation, how to subdue an angry person if you need to. Early intervention training. Safe schools training. I put a ton of work into safe schools training this year. Developed a 3-year plan for our safe schools based on input from our insurance company, our lawyer, our ESD. What should we be training? What's mandatory? And then how do we fit it into what we want to train our students to, our staff also, but not bury them in it. So we added some this year. Next year they'll get some new ones that they've never seen. The year after they'll get some new ones. And we gave them till the 1st of January to get this done, where normally we give them till the end of October. And they're busy trying to get their classrooms going, and we're loading training on them and all these new things. So they really appreciated that extra time, and I think they're actually spending the time to absorb the material this time. We provided a tactical first aid training by our SRO. He went to a class and became certified in tactical first aid, and we've deployed within our district bleeding control kits. And with our AEDs, we're the only district I know that's talked to, and every time I talk to a district about it, they're like, wow, you guys are so forward thinking. Tactical first aid is for if you have a person bleeding out, you're taught to stop the bleeding, to save the life, whether it be a tourniquet, combat gauze, a chest wound with a chest seal, it could be a bullet or a knife. What we found in these shootings is we're losing a lot of kids from bleeding out. Not the bullet wound itself isn't fatal, it's a loss of blood. So we really wanted to focus on something that if we can, it's not expensive. We probably put a couple $1,000s into this and some training, and then continue rolling this out, just a little forward thinking.
But currently only our SRO has that training. Is
Now
that
our
what you said?
SRO provided that training to all our nursing staff.
Oh, okay.
Mandatory, and then we left it open. We had a class open for 30 volunteer people to come in, so we have some random people throughout the district that received the training among me and all the nursing staff. So we have people throughout the district. Hopefully we can expand that.
Awesome.
And then incident command system, ICS training. We did one at each school last year. We're going to do it again this year. Incident command is the national system for which you would control an incident if it happened. And basically those meetings are we sit down and we say, okay, let's pick a scenario and let's talk about it. What would we do, and then how could we do it better? Walkie-talkie access. We have 74 walkie-talkies in the district. We utilize them from recess monitoring to the security staff. Every radio has OPD channel. If there's an emergency, turn it to the channel and one click, they can talk to the Othello Police Department. And they've been trained on how to use that properly. Vulnerability assessment. The chief and the SRO and I went to the National School Shield training. Part of that training was to come back and do a vulnerability assessment on one of our facilities. We've finished that assessment. At some point, we need to present that to the board. Unfortunately, it's not something we can do in an open. It's basically saying, here's all our vulnerabilities, and it's not something we're willing to just show to everybody. I can't talk about Skyward because that's check-in process. We do currently have a check-in process for our district policies, check in at the front and get a name badge, but we're looking into, you've probably heard of it, Raptor systems. Have you been to a school where you've been Raptor systems? You hand them your ID, they scan your ID, then it prints a badge with your picture on it. It's really cool. We're looking at other systems like that besides just the standard check-in process. Emergency plans, that's all in our safety crisis or prevention and crisis handbook. The high school just did a little project restriping the parking lot.
And bollards.
Bollards.
What?
They haven't been installed yet. So they're going to install some bollards to control traffic, left turns.
What are
bollards?
Sure. What are those?
They're just cones that'll be glued to the ground that
okay.
Usually they're a steel bollard to block you from hitting something like a fire hydrant, but these will be cones that hopefully won't hurt a car if they do hit them. And
we are talking high school students.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the purpose on that whole thing is just to redirect traffic in a way that has a better flow.
Okay.
And then the last one on here, we've had this conversation with the police department several times, insurance companies. this is on our radar. We're talking about it. It's not something we see in the immediate future. I don't know if you saw the OSPI statement that came out last month. You didn't see it? I can't. What's his name? Chris Rick.
What's really interesting is that the upcoming WASDA conference, they actually have a breakout session regarding that.
Awesome.
Being put on by the Toppany School District.
If I can add while you're looking for something.
I got it right here so they can
Okay.
pass it around. And I also have a statement from USIP, our insurance company, about that particular section right there that they sent out. And then okay, so students, run, hide, fight training. At some point, we have to give them this training also. We haven't figured out a great way to do that yet. We're still in discussions trying to figure out the best way to do that. Our SRO officer is a great resource for our students, getting them used to being around officers. The relationships that he creates, along with our security staff, are immensely grateful to our campuses. Motivational presentation or expert, we're going 2 weeks from now to listen to a motivational speaker that actually comes in and talks to your high school students and talks to them about issues in their school and how it's their responsibility and how they fit into the picture. And then our Adams County Sheriff K-9 unit, he comes in and does monthly inspections in our schools. I'll let Rigo talk about this next one, Gaggle.
I just thought it was really interesting in my conversation that my 6th grader and 8th grader totally knew about Gaggle and knew about whether it's anonymous or not. I just thought I was like, we're getting sidetracked. No. This is what I want to talk about. But
yeah, so I remember during the presentation to you guys last year about Gaggle and what it does for the district. So it does go through and it scrapes all the emails for our 7th through 12th graders and all of our Google Drives from seniors all the way down to, I believe, 3rd grade. So it goes through and it scrapes their whole inventory of files, and it basically will tell us if anything involves like cutting myself or killing myself or anything like that, and it will flag it to counselors that are live on site there at Gaggle, and then it will forward it off to us here at the district. Now, depending on whether they're at the high school or at the middle school, they will send an email to the principal and the vice principal with the file name and a copy of it in PDF form as well to say, hey, this is what's going on. Take a look, forward off to who you need to. And so, there's 3 different categories. There's violations, there's questionable content, and then there's possible student situations. So it goes through and it does all that for the district. So now that I'm looking at this, I should have put that Gaggle more on the staff side, because earlier this year we did train the staff on how to get into the dashboard of Gaggle to review past Gaggle reports and all that stuff to look for their schools. So we did do that training earlier this year along with Go Guardian, which is the next one on the bottom. Go Guardian we've had now for, I believe, 3 years. What that does is that goes through, it's kind of a web filter for student Chromebooks. It goes through and we can go in there and we can block certain sites if we want to. We can put kids in the penalty box if they're being inappropriate on the websites. And that penalty box would only go to sites that we allow to say, okay, you can only go here, you can only go here. And then, basically wait until either the parent tells us, okay, my kid learned his lesson, take us off of there, or the teacher does the same thing. So we do have Go Guardian. When a kid is in violation of a certain inappropriate that they're looking at on the website, Gaggle does send what they call a smart alert, and it does send it out to principals and vice principals and to myself. And so, like, if I notice something that, say somebody's looking up, like, commit suicide or something like that, and it does come, that gets to me, I make sure I forward that off right away, and also to Pete, so he's aware of it. It was been a rough year this first start of this year, because I guess it was like Suicide Prevention Week, and so teachers had people write about suicide. And so I was freaking out a lot. So I'm like, what's going on here? This is a high uptake in people wanting to commit suicide. So I was so after we talking to some of the teachers and principals, we figured that was the case. But we do see that some of as like a real situation. You know, the principals are aware of it, and they'll go and contact the counselors, and they'll go talk to the student and whatnot. So that's some of the things that we implemented. Some of the things that we do have on site is iBoss web filtering. That basically does the same thing as Gaggle almost, but it to an nth degree, where same thing, we can go through and block everything down, separate out by policies. That way we can make sure teachers are not getting blocked, but students are. You know, I think it was Tony the last time I talked in front of this group. He was saying that, you know, kids are smart though. I mean, they're looking up all kinds of ways to get around stuff. You know, and it's a battle. Every day is a fight. So, you know, so we found out some things this year that that we ended up blocking. So now we're gonna go through and we're gonna probably touch all the students' Chromebooks, just to do a fresh scrub of it. So that way it takes over the new policies, and hopefully we can beat that horse and see how it goes.
At what point, when there is something that is found questionable or completely against the rules, at what point are parents brought into a conversation?
To me, that seems like there'll be a building level decision. A principal would have to say, bring in the parent and talk to the parent. You know, there is some cases in there where students are trying to look up inappropriate images, and GoGuardian flashes a smart alert to the principals. And so, like I said, I forward that off to them and say, FYI, this student, it's in violation of the acceptable use policy, and the principal, I would assume, takes care of it. So, yeah, that's what we're doing right now. Yeah. We do live monitoring by the IT staff. So we do have iBoss up and in what's called an event mode, I guess you would call it. But it goes through and it lists everybody's web activity that goes through, and we can see the block sites that happen real time. It can show the sites that are allowed real time. So we have that up on a big screen by Adam Perez, because he's the IT operations specialist, and then I also have one in my room as well, in my office, and we're just constantly looking at that. So we do have live monitoring of the iBoss server to see how we can improve it and what students are trying to get to. And then we do restrictions with Google Admin. We're our Google domain, so under Google Admin we can go through and we can restrict stuff on the Chromebooks to not allow students to get to certain spots or have certain functions on there. So, yeah. So the one good thing about another good thing about GoGuardian is that our teachers can use it, and when they set up classrooms or sessions or whatnot on the GoGuardian, they can limit the number of tabs the student has open if they wanted to. And so if they wanted to, say, like have the Google Classroom up and then like only allow one extra website to do research on, they can do that. So that way they're not having games open or what, you know, and going through there. So we're in the process of training teachers on how to do that. So hopefully they can, students can better use their time in this.
Smart.
So,
yes.
And I think going back to that Skyward where Greg talked about it, the flags in the system, I believe flags in the system they're talking about is like when a student is a high-risk student, I think they flag them in Skyward, right? That's what it does. So that's what Skyward would do. So.
Jen, I wanted to address your question. I know the secondary schools have a template letter that if kids got in trouble with either explicit or self-harm sites, either discipline could ensue on one hand, and the parents are notified of that, as well as invited to come in and see. Or if it went the self-harm route, the counselors get involved, and there's a whole different kind of a process. But the letter is really good that is used.
I've just already read an essay of my own child's that I was like, oh, I wonder what this is going to do. That it was okay. I mean, but he talked about when his brother pushed him off the trailer and he broke his arm, and it was a violent event for him and his experience of his life. So I just thought, I wonder if that would flag something in your conversation. So, yes. But yet I haven't been. So You already are aware of one of my children, and you'll need to be aware of more of them soon.
Yes, Chief Shank's here to help support us. Some things that didn't make it into here, you know, some trainings that went to when that weren't discussed in here that our staff went to was WASO training, Washington School Security Officers, our high school, our admin team from the high school, our SRO went to that conference this year. There was an active shooter scenario training at Sunnyside High School this year. The chief and the SRO attended that. The chief was a little more involved with that. I just got to be a spectator and watch, but that was very eye-opening and kind of got a good idea of bunch of ideas Chief and I are throwing around for training. The police department does do active shooter training within our schools when no one's in them. I don't know if anyone knows that. The fire department does the same thing. They come in and go through our schools and usually in the evening when no one's around, get the idea of the layout. So if there is a fire, their volunteers can find their way around. That's that. Another thing I was actually reading today in Safety and Security from Wichita Public Schools. They just received a grant to get AEDs, and we have 2 in every school. I mean, I was curious. I was interested to read that they were just getting them. That's kind of a standard for us now. We're also looking into more electronic locks. I just got this on Thursday. This is a really cool system that you just replace the cores. Oh.
Started that with the when we were building the schools after the bond. So yeah, that's been about 10 years coming.
Yeah, and looking at door hardware right now, it's $500 for a door handle. It's $1,500 for a crash bar. Those are standard bars and standard door handles that are not electronic. The cost is outrageous. And this system I just saw was where you change the cores and you keep the hardware, and all the programming's in the key. I mean, that could be a big cost savings. They're going to come out and give us a presentation on that. Any questions so far?
Isabel had a question.
If a student's like writing an essay, say about suicide or something, would that still be reported? Oh, that's cool. I mean, not for the person writing the essay, but if something were to happen, you know.
So like the algorithm of Gaggle, it does find keywords like suicide or kill myself or anything like that, or cut myself. And so sometimes there's false positives. I mean, but that's why those live counselors at Gaggle will first look at it and read it and determine whether it is a possible student situation before they forward it off. If it's not, they might just label it as a questionable content and just send it off to the principals or whatnot just for viewing. So.
But our first line of defense is still relationships with those teachers. So to be honest, I think all of this has heightened everybody's awareness. But the conversations that went on at the beginning of this school year, even at open houses, I think were so much better because a teacher's going to be more maybe hypervigilant when they're reading those kind of essays and maybe get a counselor involved where before they wouldn't have or whatever. The message is we take everything seriously so that, you know, more of those kind of interactions are happening. So I feel good about that part.
I think that all this information would be wonderful to have, whether we had another board community forum for safety or whether it was district instigated, to give information out there and to put it, because I went to each of my kids' open houses and I didn't talk to any of those community
We were sitting right
members
there.
except for one.
Well, we were at Hiawatha. We
and
gave
I sat down and chatted
McFarland.
with you guys individually, not more about this, because I read a lot of this documentation.
And what we were, the open house we were invited to, we went to, the ones we weren't invited to, we sent copies from the community handbook to have available for staff.
Right, but I think that it would be really valuable to have, whether it's district or board, you know, I think that that's something that we need to discuss.
That's what I was going to talk, because the community side, we had the community forum last year that was great, and we talked about having another one, but we haven't, that got dropped at some point, and we do need to have another forum for the community to Some people are watching tonight, and that's great, but some people want to have a voice too, and they like that environment better than a board meeting.
Yes.
So whether it be a board or a school, would be great. And then in the community side here also at the bottom, city involvement. We've been working with the city on safe routes to schools. We have designated safe routes to schools, bicycle and walk paths within our community. And one of the things we looked at last year was Ash and 10th. We had a few accidents there, so the city put in a 4-way stop, and it's been amazing. Slowed traffic down on that road. We haven't had any accidents, and we're looking at other ways with the city to mitigate accidents with kids and bicycles and skateboards on their way to school. So that's a big thing.
So I assume if there was an incident that the city has a plan of and the school coordinated of how you're gonna handle the parents that are gonna try to get into the school and the kids that are gonna try to get out, right? I'm just curious. That's not in here anywhere. I was just curious what that is. And
that's under the incident command system. If there's an incident, please show up. They're going to take care of what's going on. We're going to try to keep as best tabs on our kids as we can, but they're going to run. Part of our thing is run, hide, fight. So then we go into where'd they go mode. We have to account for every student. We have to find out where they went, phone calls, track them down, knock on doors, till we account for everyone who was in that building. The piece, this kind of describes it. The one piece that we're still working on is family reunification. If an event happened in our school and we have this chaos, and we get most of our kids moved to a secure location, how are we going to give them back to the parents in a safe way, make sure we give them to the right person? And we're working on that. We haven't finalized all the details yet, but once we get that done, we're going to roll it into training at McFarland and the high school, the two largest facilities we have, the two that make sense, where the theory is if we have an incident, we call the school and say, we're coming, get ready. You're going to have to do family reunification, and they already know what to do. Just working out the details on that.
okay.
So, obviously one of the more controversial parts of this, and I wrote it in there on purpose because I had people asking me about it, people who were concerned about us not paying enough attention to it, is the lethal protection, and then the not to include arming staff. And I see it's touched on, but I think that going forward, I think it's a really important part of this is going to be the education part of the community on what the options are, the pros and cons, and all of that, you know, and that might come into where maybe some of these community forums that we're talking about could include experts, you know, and I'm not saying that the experts necessarily the people who are doing it at top in the school district, but the people who train them and can give us pros and cons. I just think that's a huge part of it going forward. As far as the non-lethal and preventative, this is awesome. You guys are doing a lot of really good work there. But that is the hard part. I know when I put that in there, that was going to be the difficult part. There was some requests to not even put that verbiage in. But the reason I did it, because we need to, for the sake of the community who supports that, they need to hear pros and cons so that all of us in the end are part of that process of deciding, is that an option that we want to have in a fellow school district?
Yes, and we can get into the details on that, but when you talk about lethal and non-lethal, when it comes down to it, that pencil on your table is lethal. I could use that. In run, hide, fight training, that's what we teach. We teach if you can run, run. If you can't, hide. If you can't, fight. And anything in the room can be used as defensive or offensive. A chair, a table, the mic stand. So when you talk about the arming teachers portion, the work I'm doing with the chief
it just says staff.
Oh, arming staff.
When you say arming teachers, I mean, automatically, some people automatically say you can't arm teachers.
Yeah.
They have to educate. And that's why I said staff. Because
Staff.
for me, I'm not trying to decide who gets armed or anything. I'm just saying we need to consider.
Yeah, I missed the verbiage. My fault. The discussions I'm having with the chief is he's spoken to Toppenish School District. He's talked to the chief in Toppenish about how they train them. So we're having discussions about if we did go in that motion, what is our training going to look like? What are our standards going to look like? And how much is it going to cost us? And then talk about the pros and cons of it. The pros, having a firearm on you or someone at all times. The cons, the repercussions if they miss and hit the wrong person. Having a firearm in there when the police show up is a con. They don't know what's going on. So, and the big push from our insurance company, basically saying think twice before you implement anything. Make sure you have your T's crossed and your I's dotted.
And that's where I love the discussion when you said that they're talking to the police department about another SRO officer, because I think when we start looking at it for cost effectiveness and looking for the training, it's going to be cheaper to put another officer into our school.
Yes, and that's really what it boils down to is numbers for everybody, right? I mean,
yes.
If it costs this much for an SRO or this much to train and arm.
I think we should leave some of those decisions for the professionals, and that's what they are for the lethal method.
But we're going to continue to look at it. It's not like it's not off the table.
Well, I just want to reiterate, though, the reason I put in the educating the community about the options, that's the piece that I hope we don't miss out on this. Because you can educate and train all staff, but the community in the end is going to say, well, no one even ever told me about the options, and how come I didn't get to be part of that process? Because, I have to disagree, Ken. I think ultimately the community needs to decide how we're going to do this in partnership with our staff. But to say we leave it up to the professionals, I think that this is too personal. I think there's a lot of feelings both ways about this from our community, and they need to have a really active role in that. So I'm just throwing out there as a reminder. I know that's the hardest part of this. I get it.
Well, when I had the conversation with the insurance company, when we talked about all safety in the school, it was talked about focus on high risk, high numbers. What's going on in your school and is a high risk, and then high risk and what's not happening in, and trying to find that balance for me to focus my attention to, like student accidents. We got, I think, 10 at Ludicaga already. That's a high risk.
Student accidents?
Student accidents. When it comes to safety as a whole, things that are actually happening within your district, you need to mediate them, get them to stop, find ways to fix them, prevent them. Things that aren't happening, you have to have some focus to, but you can't put all your focus on that when you have things happening right now. So, but you're right. We got to educate the community more on that stuff.
I'll just add that we are working closely with Chief Schenk on this, and I've learned also that there's many options available, lethal and non-lethal. So arming staff is certainly something that we're exploring. But one of the things that was very clear from Chief is really we have to look at the costs and the benefits and really be able to present that to the community and present the whole picture. And like you said, the community gets to decide, but we are aware of all of that.
A couple of times we've said the costs, and if something were to happen and somebody said to me, oh, I'm sorry, the cost outweighed something of your child's life, or then Mamasaurus comes out. And so I think we need to say whole picture instead of the costs are maybe a friendlier term to say that, or a more appropriate, because if there was something that did happen and somebody went back and saw something, oh, I'm sorry, it was about the costs, that's not ever an appropriate way. And so I know that that's not what specifically either anyone intended to mean.
Exactly.
But that can come across totally wrong. So maybe that should not be the highest concern. But I can understand what you're saying when those are not the things that are happening here, but could. So I just, please be very cautious when someone throws around the word the costs in a situation like that.
I certainly understand, and I think the district stance is to make sure that all of our students are safe.
Right.
And that we present all of the information to the community.
Yes.
Chief?
30 seconds. And on that, we're talking, as we're talking cost benefit, as we look at risk mitigation. If we have $1 to spend, where can we spend that dollar the best to protect and keep the most kids safe against the most risks or the more frequent risks that we can identify? So we're looking through all of this, and I got to commend this team. What are the risks? How are our kids being hurt? How might we protect them? And so we have to look at all those options. There's options that I would support very strongly that don't cost a lot of money. There's others that would be extreme. So that's kind of the syntax of how we're using it.
Right.
You always say it better than I do. Always. And then last thing on EL 16, number 4, it says Safe Schools, the creation of the Safe Schools Handbook. We renamed it this year to the Safety Prevention Crisis Crisis Plan Handbook. And it's added about 50 pages more than the last one.
Right.
Some things that were added that were in district policy that weren't in there, like pandemic in the back. There's 7 pages on pandemic.
I did read some of the pandemic. That was interesting reading, yes. Yeah. And I'm reading a novel right about that too, and I was like, oh my gosh.
This, a lot of research going into this as to what we needed, what our policies said we needed, what direction we wanted to go. I handed the Parents Guide. I saw that somewhere. I thought, man, we need that in our handbook. If we're going to give this handbook out, we need things like that in there. So it's just a lot of good information.
So eventually, once that's translated, is that going to be available on the website as a link?
So currently it's available on the website under students and parents.
You're right.
And if you click,
have to know how to hit all of the different parts of the 104
if you click Google Translate, it translates it. Oh. Or if you hit translate on the web page, Talia's going to show us.
It's up in the top right corner.
Hungarian, please.
And then translate that into Portuguese and then translate it back, and then we'll see how correct that is. Is Mixteco available as a translation?
It's not a written language.
You're right. You're right. I forgot that's not written. Okay.
If you can figure it out, though, I'm sure they'd put it on there for you.
Right.
I do want to address, and we're open for ideas. You hit it a couple of times when we can create all this stuff and say it's out there and it's posted in schools, but it's always the trick is always actually getting kids to soak it in, and in some cases, staff and all of us. And so I do think that's the charge. At least we have a lot of things in place. It's more cohesive of a plan than it used to be. And I want to make sure that parents and staff feel safe too. Everything we do is refers to not just student threat and whatever, but staff as well. So, but we're always open to ideas on new ways, social media, whatever it might be, to get kids to really soak all this in without having a tragedy to do it. Unfortunately, that's usually what it takes. So I'm trying to avoid that.
Make it be a required reading before starting a game of Fortnite. Actually, I don't even think
Okay,
Fortnite's
that's gonna
cool
call the
anymore. I think
parents
that's
on.
old stuff, and there's a new one. But
I'm in. All right.
Or
so
somehow create a video game that's fairly violent and probably would be against gaggle so that they could have a
Prevention.
second tab open and then be forced to read it in some way or find out about it.
Before they could go on to the next stage.
Right. Exactly. You have boys and get that.
Okay.
Thank you, team.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great job.
Well done. All right.
It's 15 minutes well
Thank
spent,
you,
Mr.
Dr.
President.
Hurst. Thank you, Tony, for pointing that out. So I'm admitting right now I forgot to check the times on these. I'm pretty sure that this is the times from the last board meeting carried over.
Oh,
I apologize. I think we're going to make up for it right here, though. We'll move on to item D1, monitoring reports for executive limitations and end policies. There are 2 ELs submitted. Show them how it's done, Tony.
I move to accept monitoring reports EL8 and EL9.
Been a motion by Director Ashton to accept the reports.
I'll second that.
Second by Director Johnson. Any discussion?
I just have a quick question. So, communication with the public, it was stated that as much as possible we can, that things are translated for parents that do not speak English, and so it was reported back that 53 parents, or 2%, do not speak either English or Spanish. What efforts are being made to translate things into those languages?
I'll have to check with federal programs and just check with them, but I do believe that we have some of the staff that does speak Mixteco, but I'm not sure about the other languages. So I'll check back with you, get back
Perfect.
with you.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item D2, board approval of monitoring response documents. There are 3 documents that were created as a result of the Google Forms, right? Anyways, the surveys that we did for our last monitoring. I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve EL1, the monitoring response documents for EL1, GP9, and EL11 with the modification of the movement of the comment section from comment to additional remarks.
Oh, I'm sorry, where's that part at? Can I ask that in the middle of the?
Yep.
So I think
Okay.
there's been a recommendation.
EL11.
EL11. There's a comment put in comment, and Tony's suggesting it be put in additional remarks.
Okay. I second.
Been a motion by Director Ashton, second by Director Stevenson. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. That was the quickest 45 minutes of your lives right there.
Right.
I just want to make sure, Talia, can you make sure that change is made, that's pushed down?
So then those 3 items are also in policy review. I don't believe there was any recommended modifications submitted. And so if...
I did have a question on formatting.
Okay.
On EL11, I wasn't here at the last board meeting, unfortunately. And so I did listen to it online, and I think there was confusion about what my comment meant about the formatting that I put in SurveyMonkey. So I just wanted to explain that to the board, if I could.
Okay.
So if you look at EL11, traditionally our policies are 1, 2, 3, and then ABC when we have sub-bullets. And on the SurveyMonkey itself, it was 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3 again inside the SurveyMonkey. On the policy itself, it's bullets instead of A and B. I would just like to, I think for consistency, it's not really, to me, changing the formatting is not changing the policy, but I would like to recommend that we keep our formatting consistent. So like some of these policies are 1, 2, 3, and ABC. This one, EL11, is 1, 2, 3 with bullets inside of it.
What about EL1?
So you're saying you want it to be, those bullets, you want them to be A and B?
If there's a 1, 2, 3, and if there's a 1, 2, 3, then I think the next section should be A and B to be consistent.
So
If
EL1, do you think
if
they
there's
should be 1
bullets,
and
then
2?
well, to me, it's different. But normally when you do a form, if like you create a document, it automatically does it for you. If you created that document from scratch, Word, if you tab in, it's going to move it from a 1 to an A. If you do a bullet, it's going to go from that kind of bullet to a different kind.
Depends on how you choose the formatting in the first place, though.
There's the templates, that's what they do. But the problem with doing it the way it is because then you end up with a survey monkey that's really confusing if somebody doesn't do it exactly the same. So you get that survey monkey, if you go back and look at it, there was item 1, and then over here item 1, and then item 2, and then over here there's an item 3, and I thought it was really confusing as I did the survey.
So how does the rest of the board
I
feel
agree
about
with changing EL 11 to have A and B instead of bullets.
What are your feelings on EL1?
I think EL 1 is fine.
So I think Philia has a question for clarification.
So in Board Docs, we actually don't have the option to do ABC. It has to be bullets. If I do ABC, it's going to be like a bulleted format. It's going to be me putting A, B, C.
The policies have them.
So that's because we have put ABC. It's not like an actual bullet item. So I've had to like tab it over.
It won't automatically format, is what she's saying. She has to format it by hand, manually.
Do you want me to do it for you? It wouldn't take me more than 3 minutes.
I just don't know why we wouldn't just use it across the board though, and on EL1.
I'm cool with that too. I think consistency is great.
1 and 2 is fine. I don't.
So,
make these 1.
my request would be that this is something that every time we come up for policy review, if you can just automatically change to the new formatting, then
like I
think that's
said, to
something we
me,
all
it doesn't
desire, it sounds like.
fundamentally change the policy itself, so I don't see it as having to be something that's approved.
Okay, so is it,
Same with spelling errors.
so you've made a motion to approve these, but with some formatting changes?
Yeah.
Okay?
No, I don't think I made a motion. I think I
You
just
didn't,
asked.
you just asked about it, okay.
So I didn't.
You gonna make a motion?
No, my
Or do you think we should
comment
just-
was is I don't think that kind of thing needs a motion.
Okay.
Was my comment.
So we're gonna leave the verbiage alone in these policies, but there will be some formatting changes as we go through these. Okay, so I'll just ask right now, does the board feel comfortable with saying, rather than wait till they're in policy review, just go through and do all formatting changes in all policies that we currently have?
Yes,
Okay.
and if there's a question, I guess bring it before us if there's something weird.
So Talia, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a deadline on that or anything. I know you have a lot to do, but
It'd be awesome if you went back and fixed that survey monkey though, because I know a year from now it's hard to remember to change it, and so it's be easier to change it now than it would be to wait. till
Survey
we get it
monkeys
again.
automatically have to be reformatted with any change to a policy as well, right? I think, okay. Okay, so we'll move on to item F, there is no need for executive session. Item G1, upcoming events. Board has had a chance to look at those. If there's any clarifying questions, fine. If not, we'll move on to item G2. All right, so we'll move on to item G2, board self-assessment of meeting. Please complete the survey monkey. All regular business meetings, I love that. does that. Or I'll save it and it won't give me the final page. After the board meeting. Okay, and I can't, it doesn't come up on my screen, so I'll have to read it off here. The agenda was well planned to focus on the real work of the board. 4 said commendable, 2 said good. The board followed its agenda and did not allow itself to get sidetracked. 4 said commendable, 1 said good, 1 said satisfactory. Does anyone want to speak to that? Tony?
I didn't put satisfactory.
Okay.
I put good on the agenda one.
Okay.
But you breezed by it, so.
Does anyone want to speak to where we got sidetracked? Must have been an accidental button click. Okay. Okay. The board's deliberations and decision-making processes were public. 6 said commendable. All board members participated in discussion. No one dominated. 2 said good. 4 said commendable. Members listened attentively, avoiding side conversations. 1 said satisfactory. 1 good. 4 commendable. I said satisfactory because I had a brief side conversation with Dr. Hurst. I apologize.
It was a funny joke, I heard.
He laughed, but I didn't think it was that funny. Board actions occurred at a policy level rather than an operational level. 6 said yes. The board agenda referenced policy about each topic that was discussed. 6 said yes. The board chair helped the board efficiently conduct its meeting. 6 said yes. Thank you, Tony. Thank God there's not a section that says the time frames, time limits.
Oh, it's in comments.
Discussed were, oh, great. The board supported the superintendent in any reasonable interpretation of his policy. 4 said yes. 1 said not applicable, and 1 didn't care to answer. Wait, go to the top. Up further. Wait, scroll down.
Are you looking
For
the
any
comments?
not followed, please add suggestions for future improvement. So nobody marked no, so any suggestions are invalid. Keep going. For any new policies, the board started with a broad statement. We're still struggling with this one.
It's not applicable.
1 said yes. We started with a broad statement. There were no new policies, but 5 said not applicable. The board asked the superintendent to provide reasonable interpretation. 1 saw that happened. 4 weren't applicable, and another person did not want to answer that question. And as far as the overall meeting, 6 said commendable.
Woo!
We will read this comment. Please be sure to have appropriate time estimates listed for the meetings. We want to strike that from the record. Or estimations. No, duly noted. That I apologize for that. I kind of go with the overall time frame, and I think I was pretty much dead on. So, all right. Well done, board. We have completed our business, so this meeting is adjourned.
Yay. Isabel?